There was a white hat on my nightstand. A man's fedora, cream-colored, soft felt, with a dark navy ribbon around the base. I don't own a hat like that. I don't even wear hats. Never have. But there it sat, casually, like it belonged there. And that was the moment my stomach turned. See, the funny thing is, it wasn't the lipstick stains I found, or the strange perfume that lingered in our sheets like a stranger's whisper. It was the hat. Because that hat meant he was comfortable. He wasn't hiding. He was staying long enough to take things off. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom for almost a full minute. I remember because the hallway clock chimed once behind me, and the sound startled me like a gunshot. My fingers were still holding the plastic bag from the store, inside it, a bottle of ginger ale and a box of cold medicine for Taylor. She said she had a sore throat, but her voice sure sounded fine in the video I'd just seen. You see, about 2 hours earlier, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. No text, just a file. It was a short clip, 15 seconds, maybe 20, but I've replayed it enough times to know every frame. Taylor, in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, laughing, her robe slipping slightly down her shoulder. She was holding a glass of wine. A man entered the frame behind her. I couldn't see his face, just his chest. Tan, muscular, confident. He kissed her on the neck and whispered something. She smiled. End of video. No context. No warning. Just digital proof dropped into my lap like a cruel gift. And still, I bought her ginger ale. Because somehow, I wasn't ready to believe it yet. Until the hat. Until the moment I stepped into that bedroom and saw it sitting there, next to her side of the bed. Like it had rights. That's when I heard the water running. Upstairs. Our second bathroom. We never used that one. She always said the lighting was bad. But now someone was in it. Showering. Singing. A low, masculine hum I didn't recognize. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Not sure what to do with my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just felt. Nothing. Like I was watching someone else's life. Like the floor had vanished, and I was just suspended, floating inside a moment I never thought would happen. She came in a minute later, wearing fresh clothes. Hair damp. Face glowing. She stopped when she saw me. Her eyes flicked from the hat to the bottle and my hand to the bag on the floor. I said nothing. She didn't ask me anything either. She just took a breath, stepped forward slowly, and said the words I'll never forget. Don't make a scene, Grant. Not, I'm sorry. Not, it's not what it looks like. Not even, let me explain. Just that. Like I was an inconvenience. Like I was late to a dinner party I didn't RSVP to. I stood up. Looked at her. Really looked. And it hit me, not just the betrayal, but the fact that she was prepared for this. Like she'd rehearsed the line in her head. Like she'd said it before. Maybe to herself. Maybe to him. I didn't yell. I didn't demand names. I didn't even touch the hat. I just said, okay. And I walked out. I left the house. Left the groceries. Left the coat I'd been wearing for 6 winters. I didn't take my phone charger. I didn't take my keys. I didn't even close the door. Because something in me had just shut off. That night, I drove until the gas light came on. And I didn't go back. Not even when she called. Not even when she texted. Not even when she said, let's just talk. Because I already had everything I needed to know. The man wore a white hat. And my wife told me not to make a scene. So I didn't. I made a decision. I didn't go far that first night. I parked in an abandoned church lot 3 towns over and sat there in the dark, windows up, coat still zipped. For the first hour, I just watched my breath fog the glass. I kept hearing her voice in my head, not in anger, not in desperation. Calm. Cold. Don't make a scene. As if I was the embarrassment. As if she was managing me like a PR problem. By the second hour, I started shaking. Not from cold. From that twisted mix of confusion and humiliation. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and forget why you came in? Multiply that by 1,000. That's betrayal. You keep replaying every smile, every dinner, every quiet evening watching TV, asking yourself if those moments were real or just rehearsed. Performed. I didn't sleep. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even check the time until the sky started bleeding gray. That's when I knew I couldn't go back. Not yet. Not until I understood who the man in the white hat was. Not his name. Not where he lived. Who he was to her. So I drove to a coffee shop near her office, the kind with uneven tables and baristas who pretend to know your name. I sat by the window and opened my old laptop. I still had the login info for our shared cloud drive. She never changed the password. For someone so good at lying, she was sloppy with tech. The first thing I found was an album labeled Firm Retreat Tucson. That trip was 3 months ago. She said it was mandatory. She came back with a tan and new sandals. I remember because she said I'd never understand desert air. Inside the album were 23 photos. Most of them were standard corporate nonsense: palm trees, buffets, sun hats, name tags. But photo number 16? That one stopped my heart. Taylor, smiling, her arm around a man. That same white hat perched on his head. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at her, like she was his. He was younger, maybe early 30s, clean-shaven, confident, too confident, like he'd already taken something and didn't expect to give it back. I zoomed in. The name tag on his shirt said, Beau. I didn't know a Beau, but he knew my wife. I stared at that photo until my coffee went cold. Then I dug deeper. I found a hotel receipt she'd forwarded to herself. It wasn't from Tucson. It was dated 2 weeks before that retreat. Local. A boutique hotel downtown, known for rooftop views and soundproofed walls. She never mentioned it. Next, I checked her calendar. She used a shared one, mostly for dentist appointments and dinner reminders. But there were strange gaps. Repeating entries titled Client Strategy Session, Internal Only. They fell on every other Wednesday. That was her early yoga morning. And suddenly I remembered something. 3 weeks ago, I came home sick. She wasn't there. She'd left a note that said, went for a run. Don't wait up. But I found no gym bag. No water bottle. Just a faint scent of something floral and musky in our bathroom. I remember sniffing the towels like an idiot. Back then, I brushed it off. Now, it screamed. I spent the rest of the day in my car, tailing her. I parked near her office. Watched her come out at lunch. Not alone. Beau again. He opened her car door for her like a date. She laughed. The same laugh I used to hear when we'd stay up watching stand-up comedy with popcorn between us. Now it was his. I didn't follow them. I couldn't. Something inside me buckled. Instead, I drove to my brother's place. He wasn't home, but I had a key. I stayed there that night. She texted once. Just, where are you? Can we talk? I didn't reply. The next morning, there was a second message. Please don't make this ugly. And with that, I realized something that should have crushed me but weirdly set me free. She wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared I'd ruin her image. The marriage wasn't broken because she cheated. It was broken because she never cared if I stayed, as long as I didn't make a mess when I left. And in that moment, I understood exactly what kind of story this was going to be. Not a war. Not a dramatic final scene. Just the quiet exit of a man who finally stopped pretending. And the only question now was, how much had she really hidden from me, and who else knew? Because I had a feeling the white hat wasn't just a detail. It was a signal, and I wasn't done following it. The weirdest thing about betrayal is how quiet it is. Nobody tells you that. You expect it to hit like a car crash, glass, screams, fire. But it doesn't. It creeps in like a bad smell you can't locate. You breathe it in every day without realizing until one moment, boom, you're drowning in it. I realized this the third morning I woke up in my brother's guest room, staring at the same water stain on the ceiling, listening to a silence that used to mean peace and now meant everything was gone. Her messages didn't stop. First came the half-hearted concern, are you okay? Then the control, we need to talk before you start jumping to conclusions. And finally, the polished poison I knew was coming. I don't want this to become dramatic. Let's be civil. The fact that she was already talking about being civil before I said a word? That told me everything. She was preparing her version, maybe not for me, but for others. Friends, family, coworkers. Her narrative had already begun. I wasn't going to let that happen. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a sick day. And I went back to the house. I made sure she wasn't home first. I checked the location sharing she forgot was still active on our iPad. She was at a wine bar downtown, the one with the rooftop and artificial fire pits. It was 11:40 a.m. on a Tuesday. Client lunch, I imagined she'd say. Of course. When I entered our house, it didn't feel like mine anymore. The shoes by the door were still lined up neatly, but I didn't recognize half of them. Her closet was fuller than ever. New blouses. Lacy things I'd never seen her wear. Stuff with tags still on. I stood there for a full minute, running my fingers along the clothes, not to feel the fabric, but to see if any of them were mine. They weren't. Then I opened her nightstand drawer. There was a notebook inside, the leather-bound kind you buy in expensive gift stores. I don't know why, but my hands started shaking as I opened it. Not because I expected to find a confession, but because I didn't. And somehow, that felt worse. But what I did find was something stranger. Page after page of symbols. Circles. Stars. Slashes. Names written once and then crossed out. Dates. But not normal ones, they weren't birthdays or holidays. They were spaced too precisely. Repeated bi-weekly. Marked with codes like WRL or B2S. It looked like something from a spy movie. But this wasn't fiction. This was Taylor's system. Her schedule. And then, taped inside the back cover, a small Polaroid. Her. In a mirror. In black lingerie. Holding the white hat in front of her chest, like a joke. Like a trophy. That broke something in me. Not because of the photo, but because she kept it. Taped it inside something private. Not hidden on a burner phone. Not in the cloud. In a journal. In our home. This wasn't guilt. This was pride. I put everything back exactly how I found it. I wasn't ready to confront her. I wasn't even sure what confrontation would look like anymore. But I knew I needed answers. And I needed one person who might give me one. Greg. Her coworker. The one who accidentally told me about the gala. The one who always seemed a little too observant. I still had his number. I texted him. You were right about the gala. You know more than you said. I don't want drama, just clarity. Meet me tonight. You choose the place. He replied within 5 minutes. Okay. 9 p.m. Rooftop of Riverpoint Garage. No phones. The reply was too fast. Too specific. Too planned. And that's when the paranoia kicked in. What if this wasn't just cheating? What if there was more? Not criminal. Not dangerous. Just deeper. Twisted in ways I hadn't considered. What if the white hat wasn't just some guy's accessory? What if it meant something? By the time night fell, I'd already printed every photo, every date, every journal scan I could take without leaving a trace. Because I didn't know who I could trust. But I did know one thing. This wasn't about love anymore. It wasn't even about her. It was about the story she was building behind my back. And if she wanted to make me look like the sad, unstable husband who just snapped, she was in for a surprise. I wasn't going to snap. I was going to listen. Watch. Wait. And then I'd tell the truth. On my terms. The top level of the Riverpoint parking garage isn't scenic. No skyline views, no charming neon glow, just cracked concrete, flickering lights, and the low electric hum of nothingness. But that's where Greg told me to meet him. So I went. I parked near the edge, killed the lights, and waited. The wind was sharp up there, hitting me in the face like an accusation. My heart wasn't racing, but my fingers wouldn't stop moving, drumming against the steering wheel, tapping my leg, twitching like they were waiting to fight, and my mind hadn't caught up yet. He showed up at 9:04 p.m. Drove a black Civic, license plate covered with a plastic blur strip. He parked 3 spots away, didn't wave, didn't hesitate. Just got out, walked around to the passenger side of my car, and opened the door. Leave your phone in the glove box, he said, like this was routine for him. I did. He got in, shut the door, and exhaled through his nose, like this whole thing was inevitable and he'd been expecting it longer than I had. You said you want clarity, he said, eyes forward, not looking at me. But clarity doesn't mean comfort. I didn't speak. I like you, Grant, he continued. Still do, honestly. That's why I slipped at the restaurant. I figured you deserved to know. But I also figured, if you didn't already know, maybe you didn't want to. I didn't, I said, my voice low. Until the hat. He turned to look at me, really look, like I'd just spoken a secret code. She kept it, he asked. I nodded. He whistled softly, shook his head. She's bolder than I thought. Then he said something I wasn't ready for. She wasn't just cheating, man. She was recruiting. I blinked. Recruiting. She and Bo, they're part of this group, okay? It's not illegal. It's not a cult. It's a scene. Married people, mostly professionals, who think monogamy is outdated. They call it the grid. Meetups, rules, boundaries. Everyone signs agreements. No emotional attachment, just exploration. My brain went still. They have schedules. Check-ins. Even NDAs, depending on who's involved. Some of these people are judges. CEOs. Your wife? She's not just part of it. She's kind of one of the anchors. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded like something from a show. Some late-night Netflix drama that gets canceled after 2 seasons. She lied to my face, I said. Of course she did, Greg replied. That's part of it. It's not about honesty, it's about secrecy and consent between them. You weren't invited into it, so you were kept out. That's their logic. She's married to me, I said quietly, like he'd forgotten. She thinks you're weak, Greg said even quieter. That's why she never bothered to hide it that well. Because you wouldn't fight her. You'd walk. And she thinks walking is harmless. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Greg reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. Set it on the dash like a card in a poker game. That has the photos from Tucson, he said. Not the ones on the agency server. The ones she asked me to delete. I didn't. Because I saw your face at that dinner last year. You still looked at her like she was magic. He paused. She hasn't looked at anyone like that in a long time. I picked up the drive. It felt too light for what it held. She's not in love with him either, by the way, Greg added. Bo? He's just the flavor of the month. The hat? Probably his idea. He thinks he's a cowboy. But she'll replace him soon. That's how the grid works. I couldn't tell if the anger in my stomach was for her, or for me, or for how calm Greg sounded describing all of this like a PowerPoint. Why tell me this? I asked. Because she asked me to be next, he said. And I said no. Then he got out, closed the door, and walked back to his car. He didn't look back. I sat there in the silence, staring at the flash drive. Somewhere down below, a car alarm went off. A dog barked. The wind pulled at the corners of a napkin stuck to my windshield. She hadn't just broken vows. She'd joined a system built on erasing them. And the worst part? She'd assumed I would never figure it out. Because I was too quiet, too passive, too afraid to make a scene. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Because now I knew the whole thing wasn't personal. It was procedural. And that meant one thing: she never thought of me as a person. Just a placeholder. But placeholders don't stay silent forever. Not once they start documenting the truth. I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour copy center and printed the photos from the flash drive Greg gave me. There were 57 of them. Some staged, others candid. None of them left room for denial. She wasn't just cheating. She was living a double life so confidently that her smile in those pictures looked more like triumph than affection. It wasn't even Bo she looked at that way. It was the camera. Like she knew someone would see. Like she wanted to be seen. I sat in the fluorescent glow of the shop lobby, flipping through the images while the clerk in the back clicked his pen in rhythm. I imagined what she might say if I confronted her now. You're overreacting. This is adult freedom. You were never curious, Grant. You never evolved. I could hear the script already. I knew she'd trained herself for it. Taylor never did anything she hadn't rehearsed. But the biggest question wasn't why anymore. It was who else? Who else knew? Who else was watching me eat dinner with her, kiss her goodnight, talk about bills and future travel and remodeling the guest room, all while knowing she was lying every single day? And that's when I remembered someone strange. A man who came to the house twice in the last 2 months. Said he was from the homeowners committee, though we never had one. He was polite. Mid-40s. Wore a wedding ring, always smiled at me with too many teeth. He brought Taylor a packet of papers once, said they were review notes, but I never saw her open them. When I asked her who he was, she said, he's just from the board, babe. It's boring. But now I knew there was no board. I found the packet buried in our mail drawer that night, after sneaking in while she was out again. This time I wore gloves. I didn't turn on any lights. I moved through the house like a ghost, one she no longer believed in. Inside the packet was a single page folded. Not notes. Not community updates. A list. Code names. Names of people. Roles. Hosts. Anchors. Floaters. Times. A date next to each line. Taylor's name, Astor, was beside multiple sessions marked with red dots. Bo was listed twice under our group, and 3 others I didn't recognize: Claymore, Juniper, and Monarch. But the most disturbing entry? G. Winners, placeholder / inactive. Not informed. That was me. They had me labeled, documented, tagged like a borrowed tool. I stood in the kitchen, holding that list, and suddenly the air felt thick. Like I wasn't standing in my house anymore, but on a stage I didn't know existed, where I was never supposed to realize I was part of the performance. Just a prop. I took the packet, photos, and the flash drive, and left again. This time I didn't go to my brother's. I drove 5 hours north to my uncle's cabin, the one we never used except during Christmas. It had no Wi-Fi, just a radio, a dusty TV, and the kind of silence you could pour into a glass. And there, I started writing. Not a letter, not a confession, a timeline. Every date, every lie, every inconsistency. I mapped it like a crime scene. I had journals, screenshots, voice memos from memory. I even recorded myself narrating the whole story, from the moment I saw that white hat to the moment I found my name in that packet. Because Taylor wasn't just cheating. She was managing an operation. And I was the controlled variable. The stable husband. The dull one. The background figure who allowed her to pretend she had a normal life while she rotated lovers and documented them like she was filing tax returns. But she miscalculated one thing. She thought silence meant weakness. But silence is where the real stories form. The ones people believe. The ones that spread. And I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to confront. I was going to publish. Not online. Not publicly. But privately. Selectively. Her parents. Her sister. Her coworkers. One envelope at a time. With evidence. With dates. With the line she never expected from me. This is what I didn't say when I left. Because sometimes you don't make a scene in the moment. You make one after the curtains fall. It's a strange thing, realizing your story has shifted from tragedy to strategy. For weeks, I walked around in a fog, not knowing where the ground ended and the sky began. But now I saw it all clearly. Not just what she'd done, but the system she'd built to protect it. It wasn't about Bo anymore, or even the grid. It was about truth, and how meticulously she tried to bury it beneath her charm, status, and confidence. That was her fortress. Not love, not family, just presentation. So, I began to dismantle it. Quietly. I returned from the cabin with everything labeled, time-stamped, and ready. I didn't need a crowd. I didn't need to go viral. I just needed the people around her to see. I started with someone who once called me the calm in her storm, her sister, Lacey. I mailed the envelope with no return address. Just her name. Inside, a letter from me, 2 photos, a screenshot of a text exchange between Taylor and someone saved in her phone as Dorian, workgroup only, and a single sentence written in bold at the bottom. She said not to make a scene. I didn't. But this is the scene she didn't want you to see. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, I got a voicemail. Not from Lacey, from Taylor. She sounded almost composed. But I could hear it. That wobble in her voice. That tiny hesitation after every sentence. It wasn't panic yet. It was the realization that something was slipping. Grant, I know what you're doing. Please don't involve my family. This isn't the way. You're hurting people who don't deserve it. If you need to talk, I'm willing. But stop whatever this is. Please. I didn't respond. Because I knew what she was really saying. You're threatening the image. Not the affair. The image. So I sent the second envelope to her boss. This one had photos from the gala, the hotel receipt from 3 months prior, and a scanned copy of the grid roster with her code name circled in red. Then I sent one to our couple's therapist. We hadn't been in 6 months. But when we went, she insisted on driving separately. Insisted we keep it compartmentalized. Now I understood why. I didn't say anything to my family. Not yet. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it to watch her feel what I had felt. Not the heartbreak, the helplessness, the spiraling doubt, the realization that no one believes the story you're trying to sell anymore. By the 4th envelope, the calls began to change. Not just hers, others. A friend of hers, Jenna, called me crying. Said she was sorry. Said she never knew. Said she thought we were this stable couple. I wanted to ask her what she did know, what she saw and ignored. But I didn't. Because silence is a tool, and I was learning to wield it like a scalpel. The 5th envelope went to Bo. No note. Just the grid list. His name circled. Her name highlighted. A printout of her message. He's harmless. Just routine. It'll be clean. Let him read that on a Monday morning. That week, Taylor finally appeared in person. I was staying in a long-term rental by then, a short-term corporate place with no personality. White walls. Synthetic towels. The kind of place built for people passing through. She knocked, uninvited. I opened the door and let her stand there in silence. Her eyes were tired. Makeup lighter than usual. Hair back. Less fire, more smoke. I want to talk, she said. I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of the bed like a guest, legs crossed, hands folded like she was in a courtroom. I know you're angry, she began. I didn't answer. I know I've hurt you. Still nothing. I didn't expect you to do all this, she added. This campaign. That made me smile, just barely. This isn't revenge, I said, finally. No, she asked. Then what is it? It's a mirror, I said. You're just not used to your own reflection. She looked away, jaw tightening. You made me look like a monster. I shrugged. I didn't make anything. You built it. I just turned on the light. We sat there in silence for what felt like a year. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't offer an apology that meant anything. Eventually, she stood and headed for the door. Then she stopped, hand on the knob. "You said you wouldn't make a scene," she said, almost softly. I looked her straight in the eye. "I didn't," I replied. "But scenes don't have to be loud to leave ruins." She left, and I sat there in the quiet again. But this time, the silence was mine. It started like a crack in a frozen lake, soft, invisible, but with a sound you feel in your bones. One day, her LinkedIn page quietly disappeared. The next, her agency's team bio was under maintenance. By the end of that week, 3 of her coworkers had either gone mysteriously quiet on social media or completely unfriended her. Nobody said anything. But silence like that, it's not neutral. It's a signal. She underestimated how fast the truth travels when it arrives without warning. Not in a post. Not in a thread. In envelopes. Quiet ones. Precise. Inescapable. Truth that doesn't ask for sympathy, it just sits there. Undeniable. I didn't send anything to destroy her. I sent it because I needed the lie to stop breathing. But what I didn't expect was what happened next. I got an email. From her mother. I hadn't spoken to her in almost a year. She always saw me as too soft for Taylor. I wasn't ambitious enough. Not polished enough. Too kind, not charismatic. The kind of man who wouldn't embarrass her daughter, but never quite impress either. But the email she sent me? It was short. Just 4 words. "I owe you clarity." Attached was a scan letter. Handwritten. Torn from a journal. Taylor's. Dated 2 years earlier. It read like therapy. Scribbled thoughts. Confession. Emotion poured out not for forgiveness, just to get it out of her head. There was one line circled 3 times. "He doesn't challenge me, that's why I know he's safe. Safe means I can lie. And under it. If I ever get caught, I'll just call it a phase." It hit like a bullet. Not because of what she said, but because she prepared for discovery that long ago. Her affair, the grid, the image, it wasn't a break in her moral code. It was a strategy. And I was a calculated element in it. A placeholder. A shield. And for the first time in my life, I realized I had never actually known her. We shared a mortgage. A bed. A dentist. But not a life. I was a passenger in something she controlled, from the invitations we received to the version of me she described at work parties. I was never asked to grow beside her, only to remain unchanged so she could evolve without resistance. I didn't respond to her mother, but I did send one final envelope. To Taylor. No note. No photos. Just a printout of her journal page, the one with the line about safety and lies, taped to a blank sheet. And written under it in pen. "You were right. I was safe. And you lost that." The next morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity is claws. It was Beau. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just sounded small. "I didn't know," he said. "She told me you were separating. That you were both emotionally done, just sharing the house for logistics." I said nothing. "She used us all," he added, more to himself than to me. "Do you think she ever loved anyone?" I didn't answer that either. Because it didn't matter anymore. Whether she loved anyone or not didn't undo what she'd built. It didn't erase the choices, the duplicity, the journal entries that planned my irrelevance like a dentist appointment. After that call, I finally felt it. Release. I no longer needed revenge. I no longer needed her to hurt the way I did. Because now she was surrounded by echoes of her own design. And I wasn't in them anymore. I was gone. But not forgotten. Because she would spend the rest of her life rewriting the narrative to make herself look better. That's what people like her do. But she would never again be able to erase the fact that someone, somewhere, knew the full story in order, in detail, in silence. She said not to make a scene. And I didn't. But she was the one who ended up performing to an empty room. A month passed. Then 2. There were no more calls. No more emails. Taylor went quiet, and I let the silence be. I didn't search her name. I didn't ask mutual friends. I didn't refresh her socials. I had no appetite for her new version of events. I already knew how she rewrote people. I had been one of her edits. What I did do was start my life over, not dramatically, not loudly, but quietly, purposefully. I closed out our joint accounts, transferred my name off the house, let her keep it. That place had walls I could no longer breathe in anyway. I sold my car. Got a used one with no seat memory. It felt symbolic. Every time I got in, I'd have to adjust. Start fresh. Remember what my comfort looked like. I moved into a small lakeside town where no one knew me, where I could be something other than Taylor's husband or the guy who walked away from it all. I got a part-time job fixing bikes at a shop with no background music and a coffee machine that hissed like a steam engine from the 30s. The owner, his name's Marvin, didn't ask a single personal question. He just showed me where the tools were. Every day, I arrived before sunrise, unlocked the gate, swept the leaves from the sidewalk, and worked until my hands ached. It was perfect. There was something deeply honest about mechanical things. They don't lie. When something breaks, it doesn't pretend. It just stops working. Unlike people. Unlike marriages. Unlike perfect smiles across candlelit dinners that mean nothing. Eventually, I started seeing a woman named Elise. She came in for a flat tire and asked too many questions. But they weren't invasive. They were curious. Soft. She didn't ask what I'd been through. She just asked what I liked to do on rainy days. We started meeting for coffee. She talked about books, music, her dog. She laughed like nobody was watching, not because she wanted to be seen, but because she couldn't help it. It was unpolished and beautiful. And when I told her I didn't know who I was anymore, she said, "Good. That means you're finally becoming." I never told her everything. Not right away. But one night, as we watched the lake fog roll in, I told her the sentence that started it all. The one Taylor whispered to me before everything broke. "Don't make a scene." Elise looked at me, curious, then smiled softly. "And you didn't?" I shook my head. "No," I said. But I left the theater. And I started writing something else. She didn't press. She just nodded, leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat in the quiet, the kind I no longer feared. Because the truth is, I didn't need to destroy Taylor. I didn't need to win. I just needed to get out. And I did. Not by force. Not with rage. But with clarity. With stillness. With a decision. Now, I wake up to peace, not perfection, not constant joy, but peace. No locked phones. No strange codes. No gallery of staged smiles. Just early mornings, coffee that tastes like firewood, a woman who doesn't need control to feel loved, and the slow, honest work of rebuilding myself. So yes, she said, don't make a scene. And I didn't. I built a life instead.